and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, I call this meeting to order. Thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. For those watching on TV, we have a really large audience. We're very excited to have everyone here today. And to also have the town manager, Melissa, here to present the operating budget for FY21. So before we start, I'll just open it up to any public comment. All right. All right. So there's no public comment right now. So Melissa, whenever you're ready, we'd love to have you. Thanks for coming.
No problem. I'm not sure if any of you had a chance to review the budget yet or were able to watch the presentation that we gave to the Board of Selectmen, but I'm basically going to run through the same presentation in essence, and then we're happy to answer any questions. So obviously this is the fiscal year 21 town manager recommended budget. And first we're going to talk a little bit about the fiscal year 21 budget revenue. And the town is presenting a balanced budget within capacity as determined by our forecasting exercises and additional information that we have learned since then. This includes consideration of the advice of the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee. Property taxes are higher than originally projected due to certified new growth in fiscal year 20, as well as new growth projections for fiscal year 21. So basically doing a new growth analysis, we met with the building department, the planning department, the assessors, and really tried to drill down into what we thought would come on in fiscal year 21 so that we could correctly forecast what that new growth would look like. And that's one of the things that led us to the higher number than what we had forecasted back in December. The $111 million number that you're seeing here as the recommended includes the transfers to the stabilization accounts and funding from capital from using free cash. And it's a comprehensive number. So it's the general fund, it's free cash transfers, it's really the budget in a whole. And I'll drill down more into what the general fund budget looks like as we move through the slides. So this just gives you a breakdown of what the fiscal year 21 revenue looks like. As you can see, the majority of it continues to be property taxes. About 72% of the town's budget is funded through property taxes. And we'll run through a little bit what these other categories are. And I'm sure you remember because a lot of them we talked about just last month. So the revenues for the fiscal year 21 budget total $105,518,926, which is a 4.01% increase in revenues from fiscal year 20. Again, not including free cash reserves and capital because it's not part of the operating budget. The property taxes are estimated to grow by 4.5%, $3.64 million. So again, that's more than 2.5% because of the new growth certification and forecasted new growth for fiscal year 21. Local receipts, which are excise, building permit fees, etc., are forecasted to grow by 4%, $436,000. Local aid, per our policies and procedures, is level funded. So we take the number from the for past year because often we won't know what the budget's going to look like for the governor until much after our budget is passed. This year, even longer than usual. So that's level funded. And our operating transfers are actually decreasing, which I will get into more when we talk about the Stevens estate. This is a summary of the budget expenditures for fiscal year 21. So this includes everything, our state assessments, money that's going into the overlay, all of the capital, and the total budget is $111,217,162. This is a breakdown of the fiscal year 21 expenses. I just want to note that that 48.3% number you're seeing for education is not really a true number for the education budget. You would need to include the school's benefit costs as well as the support services and shared costs. It's calculated more at around 68% of the budget. Debt makes up about 5%. Our employee benefits around 15%, general government 2%, and public safety 10%. And some things like culture and recreation, only 1%. The fiscal year 21 budget includes increases of 4.07% in departmental spending from fiscal year 20. The municipal departments are increasing by 4.5%, support services are increasing by 1.22%, and the education budget is increasing by 4.52%. Our general fund spending, which includes all the reserves, is increasing by a total of 3.14%. Municipal budget size increasing by $967,000. The school budget is increasing by $2.3 million, and support services is increasing by $23,000. So, bridging the gap. As you know, this year we faced a potential budget gap between the forecasted revenues and the requests from the cost centers, in particular the schools. Working collaboratively, we were able to bridge that gap, and we'll continue to work with the superintendent to identify the future potential needs and exploring sustainable, realistic funding mechanisms. This year, in order to bridge the gap, we level funded health insurance and increased the revenues through certified new growth and the future new growth analysis, but that's not something we'll be able to do every year. That's not a sustainable thing to do. We can't continue to level fund health insurance. This is really a one-time savings. So we're going to need to work together and be creative in finding sustainable funding mechanisms moving forward for future budget needs. So this year was good because we were able to take these initiatives, but we're going to really have to explore how to fund the needs moving forward. So health insurance. The town joined the GIC back in 2014. At that time, the town was self-insured and appropriating $11,091,614 for our health insurance budget. In fiscal year 21, 7 years later, the recommended health insurance budget is $10,732,951. So the nerd in me is quite excited by this because we're actually spending less on health insurance now than we were spending 7 years ago, which I think is a very commendable thing for the town. This $10 million number includes the 6% increase that we're expecting right now from the GIC. We're forecasting between 4 and 6% at the GIC. They do think that the increase will be more this year than typically due to some design changes that they're making. So we went with the 6%, which is probably the safe bet at this point. It also includes the 11 new employees that have been requested in the school department budget. So those employees have all been included in this $10.7 million number. For the first time, we were able to do a real health insurance breakdown. So Denise Casey, who's the deputy town manager, created a health insurance model, which has been super helpful and has allowed us to take a look at where our employees are, what they're costing us, and now we're having kind of bigger conversations about the number of employees we have on the highest cost plans and whether or not education would really start to move some of those employees maybe to more affordable plans. And so we're working on that now, and I think that will be fruitful. But currently, the way our health insurance is broken down is $3 million goes to our retiree health insurance. $5.6 million is the school employee health insurance. That's for active employees working today. And $2,090,000 is the town active employee health insurance. So in past years, the health insurance line item was over budgeted, and then that surplus was used each year to offset deficits and fund unknowns and emergencies. And that was done really on purpose, from what I understand. So the surplus was left in there, the savings were left in there because we didn't want to see the savings kind of get gobbled up. And then they were used to do things like offset snow and ice deficits, deal with capital emergencies, fix special education deficits in the school department, et cetera, right? This year, since we're budgeting based on this new model, we're asking to put those excess funds in a finance reserve account. That's really the appropriate place to have them, right? So if you have this finance reserve account, what you can do is we come to you and we say we have an emergency. Snow and ice is over by $432,000, and we apply to the finance committee to make a transfer to the snow and ice account. So instead of the money all just being held in the health insurance line and us having to come forward and ask to transfer from the health insurance line, it'll be a more transparent process because we'll have this reserve account, which I think will make a big difference in our budgeting. For the appropriations to reserves, for the capital stabilization, we'll be appropriating $413,000 from free cash. That will take us to the 5% policy that we have. Is that right? 5% of the capital? Thank you. For stabilization, same thing. We're going to be transferring $20,233 to comply with our policy. For the OPEB trust, we will be doing $75,000 plus the $66,000 per employee as a prepayment per position for the prepayment of liability for the 11 new employees proposed in the school budget. So one of the things that came out of the OPEB group was that they wanted us to prepay for the liability of any new employees that we brought on. And so since the school department has proposed 11 new positions in the budget, we are asking to do that. For the overlay, which as you know is the money we use to pay for our tax abatements, is $550,000. In the finance reserve account that we spoke about a few minutes ago is $1,566,695. For town staffing, we are asking to increase by 0.5 positions, and I will show you as we go through. It's a non-benefited position. Our current staffing level is 211.47. We're asking to get to 211.97. And I'm just going to run through. Tiny people, little people, yeah. It's fine. Yeah. Yep. No, we're doing a lot of reorganization, some reorganization, which you'll see here, which helps us get to some of the goals that we're trying to meet. So I'm just going to run through kind of the highlights and changes in the town budget. There's really nothing major, but we wanted to explain what you're seeing that's different. So in human resources, we're asking to increase funding for employee trainings, wellness, and recognition initiatives. So we've already been doing a lot of training over the last few months. We're hearing from employees that they really want to see more things that go around training. We have OSHA training to do, but also we would like to do recognition initiatives to really build morale and build teamwork within the organization. We want to have people who are happy so they stay and continue to work for us because we have a really good team here. So that's $6,000. We're also going to be doing a consolidation of positions in human resources. So we're consolidating the duties of 2 employees to 1. And through attrition, we're going to be seeing a savings of $30,000. In community development, we're investing in funding for digitalization of documents. This is actually in the conservation side that we would like to do this. That's $58,000. Basically, this would allow us to have searchable documents. So if somebody was buying a house, they could search and see, are there any orders outstanding? Are they within wetlands? And that goes a long way for residents not to have to come in and fish through everything that we have in the archives. We also are asking to introduce a part-time position here. It will either be a part-time or an employee share. So we're in conversations right now with Andover about whether or not there's any potential to do sharing with them for this position. This person is a really important new initiative. So basically what they'd be doing is helping to implement the recommendations from the Housing Production Plan and the Master Plan, but also studying the housing that's coming forward, making sure that the housing we have that is affordable stays affordable, and helping us to get to our 10% mark. So right now, the planning department is doing a really good job of trying to track where we are with our 10%, what the census is going to mean for us, what our subsidized housing inventory is, can we keep that inventory? But it's a huge job, and it's actually really important to the community. And so we're trying to introduce that this year as well. The police department is introducing a therapy dog. That's going to be the $5,200 stipend, an annual canine care cost of $4,200, plus the one-time cost of the dog, which is $7,000. In youth and recreation, we have the addition of 1 part-time, not benefit-eligible administrative assistant for $18,000. So that person currently is being filled with parent volunteers. The parent volunteers will continue on Fridays, but we really need this. For the amount of people we have coming in, we really need the stability of having someone at that front desk. And so if we don't have parent volunteers, we have to have the program staff manning that desk, and that really takes away from the programming that we can do. For the fire department, we have the introduction of 4 new lieutenant positions. So we're currently working with Chief McCarthy on a vision for a long-term staffing plan for the department. What do we want to look like in 5 years? How do we want to be operating? We're doing it both with police and fire. This plan for fiscal year 21 is promotions only, no new positions. It would allow for an additional fire company line officers to enhance safety and provide an effective span of control at every incident. It would cost $22,000 in salaries and $72,000 in overtime. Those salaries include pretty much everything, the night diff, longevity, any holiday pay. And so we're very excited about this initiative. One of the things that we've been talking about internally is you don't really know what you need in an emergency until you really have one. And the incident command aspect of it is very important to Chief McCarthy, and I'm happy to be able to support that. One other thing that we're doing that's not highlighted here is we're moving our injury on duty funding out of the fire department's budget and over to and police and over to the benefits line. Because right now, if you have an employee who's injured long term, they would be both receiving a salary and affecting the overtime budget, when really it's a benefit. It should be coming out of the benefits line item so that they can more accurately and adequately provide the services that we need. It can be very stressful when the overtime budget goes into the deficit, and so we're working on trying to find ways to alleviate that. In Public Works, one of the things that you'll see is that we're consolidating all of the fuel. So before, if you look through everybody's budget, they all had gasoline in there. And what was happening was basically DPW was creating invoices and sending them to the departments, and then the departments were paying for their gas. We'll still track the gas because we have a gas system, but we're getting rid of that administrative burden of trying to bill people for the gasoline, since it's all one town. And we're also consolidating all the DPW salaries for payroll efficiencies. So before, you really had to kind of understand all the intricacies of the payroll. Doing overtime was really difficult to figure out. And so now all of our DPW salaries are under one account, and it will make it much easier for our payroll folks, since that's one of the positions that we are conjoining together to really do that salary. So that's exciting. In information technology, we're increasing the funding for cybersecurity for $20,000. This is a big initiative right now for every community. There's been quite a few towns that have fallen victim to cybersecurity scams. We are currently doing have a grant that we got from the state that we're using, but we need to continue to fund this initiative to protect the town. So we have increased funding for that this year. And then we're introducing 2 new softwares. One is ClearGov, and ClearGov's about ready to roll, so maybe at one of your next Finance Committee meetings we can highlight how it works for you. So that is transparency and budgeting software. And then FlashVote, which is a public input software, so it takes statistically relevant data. My big concern being that we're trying to collect information from the community. Right now, they're about to put a survey out for the Stevens Estate, and it's very difficult using SurveyMonkey or any of the other platforms to make certain that you're really getting data that is relevant. So I could log on to SurveyMonkey and take the survey 50 times if I wanted to. This stops that. And so I think that's going to be great for the community moving forward. So they're actually doing that as a pilot for us right now to see how the community likes it, but we've budgeted it for the next fiscal year. So just to hop into the enterprise funds really quickly, the sewer enterprise fund budget is increasing by $170,059. The majority of that increase is due to the expected increase in the assessment from the sanitary district. The sewer rates are forecasted to remain the same this year, so this will be the 9th consecutive year, but we want to be realistic that if the sewer assessment continues to increase at the rate that it has been increasing, we will be looking at a rate increase in probably a future near year, which is not unusual. For the water enterprise fund, that budget for operating is increasing by $358,954. Again, the water rates will be able to remain the same for the 9th consecutive year. We will be implementing one really major new initiative, which is the hydrant flushing program. So that will cost $225,000. It's a system-wide flushing, doing flow testing and hydraulic modeling. 750 hydrants a year. It will take us 2 years to get through all the hydrants in town because I believe there's 1,500. So this would be an ongoing project. It's not something we would just do once. This would continue on forever. It's really a public safety issue and a necessity. So it not only makes certain that the hydrants are operating correctly in a fire, which is really its #1 job, but it also leads to improved water quality because a lot of the time you get sediment in those lines, naturally occurring sand, and by flushing those out, it improves the quality of the water. So we're really excited to be bringing this forward. And then the other initiative is $115,000 to fund an update to the lake's watershed plan. So the last time, she's laughing because I can't say the lake's name, so I just keep skipping it. It's fine. I'm never going to say it, just so we all know. It was last updated in 1987. It's one of the goals from the master plan. This is a one-time cost. So basically, we'll be looking at the zoning around the lake, understanding the conservation issues around the lake. How should we be updating our regulations to make sure that we continue to protect our water source? And so, like I said, this was a goal from the master plan, and we're excited to start kind of rolling a lot of those implementation goals out. And then finally, we have the Stevens Estate. So we've been working really closely, the town staff, the trustees of Osgood Hill, and the Stevens Estate Long-Term Advisory Committee. And everyone's, I've been joking, but I feel very optimistic about the Stevens Estate this year. We're trying a lot of new initiatives, we're trying new things, and we're all working together. And so I think this is going to be a very transformative year for us. But we have done a few things within the budget that's a little bit different from what you're used to. So we're decreasing the budget. It's going from $496,000 to $360,000. But it's decreasing, but the services are not. So let me explain. We're removing all of the indirect costs. This is a 1-year thing we're going to try, because if we don't remove them, we won't make it, unfortunately, at the rates where they are. And we don't want to price ourselves out. So what we're trying to do is kind of a reset year for the Stevens Estate. So we're removing the indirect costs. And if you remember correctly, the indirect costs are the health insurance, a little bit of the payroll, salary, et cetera, right? Before we put the indirect costs back in, we would really do like a full indirect cost study, make sure that the numbers are exactly where we want them to be. But this year, I'm advising to remove them all, and I think Lynn agrees with me. We had a reduction of 1 full-time employee during fiscal year 20, so that brought the salary line item down. We reduced the liquor license payment. The Board of Selectmen voted not to charge for the liquor license since it was a town entity, so that's being removed. And we have no capital expenditures this year in the enterprise fund. So the last 5 or so years, we were using retained earnings to do capital. We're just starting the bathroom project from fiscal year 20 now, and so we're gonna skip a year of capital. We do have 2 CPC applications in right now, but this kind of gives us a year to start building those revenues back up and see where we are at the end of the year and reevaluate. So like I said, while the budget is decreasing in total, it's not a reduction in service, because the burden of those indirect costs have been removed, and we've added $10,000 for marketing and advertising and $5,000 in part-time salaries. So currently, there is a part-time event manager position that is open, and that person really only worked when there was events. And we're trying to bring a little bit more stability to that position, so that person's there more hours on weeks, even when there's not events, so that they can help with not only the estate, but also with marketing, with bringing new business in. And so we're hoping that that increase will help. So that gives that person about 5 more hours a week. So just to run through the Stevens Estate financials a little bit. So fiscal year 17 was really the year that we started doing any capital. And it was also the year that we started kind of showing deficits. And so there's been a lot of conversation about the Stevens Estate and the Stevens Estate financials and trying to understand how that budget works. And if you pull out that transferred capital, the operating expenses are less than the revenues up until fiscal year 19. And then in fiscal year 19, we still would have shown a $20,000 deficit. So one of the arguments I think all along has been that when you're talking about the operating amount and you're talking about the surplus versus the deficit, we shouldn't be including those capital costs. And so when you look at it that way, you know, I think you can look at it that way and understand that argument. So in fiscal year 20, we built the budget assuming $449,000 in revenues, and we assumed to use retained earnings that year to offset some of the costs. Year to date, the town has collected cash in hand $166,000. And so this was as of 2 weeks ago-ish. And I know there's additional bookings that have deposits that are included in that amount, and that will bring additional revenue as the year continues, and that there's a lot of people who are looking at the estate right now and planning to book. But we can only deal with what we have actually in the coffers at that date. When we put an amount out, it means that's the amount we've collected, and so that's the amount that we're extrapolating from. We're really excited because Andrew Shapiro, Joanna, the director, and I have been working on new rates, and we're kind of putting out some new endeavors, like we're putting the catering business out to bid, we're working on increasing the marketing, we're talking about a business plan, and we're really hopeful that we'll see increased revenues for fiscal year 21. But despite all of that, I still feel the need to be relatively conservative about that. And so I'm building the fiscal year 21 budget on $368,386. And so that brings you kind of back to the little less than the fiscal year 19 numbers. You know, I'm hoping that it will come in higher than that, but I just want to be realistic of what we're building, because when we build these enterprise fund budgets, they have to be approved by DOR. And if we can't show that the rates that we have are going to support this budget will not get certified. So, you know, we have to be maybe even more conservative than we typically would be, although I know I've pushed Lynn to the limit here on this one. But what I will say is that next January, when we're sitting here, if the revenues are not to that halfway point, if we're not showing those revenues, we'll have to make budget cuts. And so what that would look like is kind of putting like a no spend freeze on the different items. What I'm hoping is that we have so many bookings that we're actually trying to find ways to spend more money. But we'll see where we go, and I do feel very optimistic about it. I can't continue to want to use retained earnings to offset the operating shortfalls. So the retained earnings of an enterprise fund are like our free cash, right? And we would never use free cash to offset our operating budget, right? Because it creates a structural deficit in future years. And so if we continue to do that here, it continues to cause bigger problems. And so what we really want to do is continue to work with the director to find ways to increase that revenue. And so we're committed to the success of the Stevens estate, and we want to continue to be committed to that in fiscal year 21. And I just want to say thank you to everybody, because they've listened to me twice now. And I've tortured them over the last few months, really getting to know the budget, and also thanks to Lynn and Dee, who have been amazing. So thank you, and we're happy to answer any questions, me or anybody of the department heads, if you have any questions for them.
Thank you very
No
much.
problem.
Incredibly informative and helpful. You guys tell me, how do you guys have questions you want to start with, or should we ask some department heads to come up yeah.
On the health insurance analysis, you said you did something you haven't done before, an overview of the health insurance, about the cost of it, or you broke it down better. And I'm curious whether that analysis looked at the age groups of your employees within town. Was it like that? Like, how many people do you have under the age of 20, between 20 and 45, over the age of 60? As a precursor to how much insurance might increase. As you know, an older population is a much more expensive population, as a way to forecast going forward. It was,
You want to talk about the model? Dee spent weeks working on the model, so I would love to have her talk about it, if you don't mind. It's very complicated. Yeah.
You can share, or is that?
Yeah. I mean,
age group? I wouldn't, that's not
The model
proprietary.
was created based on actual enrollment as of December. So we didn't break it down by age group, we broke it down by actual cost. So actual cost centers, how many people are on Medicare, which plan, how many town employees are on X plan, and how many school employees are on Y plan. So it was basically a model to project what we currently will spend in FY '20, as well as what we're projecting in FY '21. We don't have the rates yet. At the end of the month, the GIC will vote on the rates. So then we can go in and individually tweak the model to say if one plan goes up 6%, one plan goes up 3%, we can actually reflect that in what we're projecting to spend in '21.
But don't forget, because we're not self-insured anymore, our claims don't really cost us money, right? So if we have younger people who are going on family plans, that causes us increases, but your actual claims will not cost us anything anymore.
We're all premium-based.
The numbers are thrilling, absolutely thrilling, to see how much we have decreased in spending on health insurance since I remember first saying, why are we in the GIC? So bravo.
It's amazing,
to Andover
right.
for making that choice.
Well, that's why we built up the reserves, so
Yes.
that been able to keep us
Yes,
going.
that's right.
So,
As long as we have. It's impressive. This
It's
is,
very impressive.
that's a remarkable number, so.
I'm on the GIC commission, and I brought them these numbers up at our last meeting, and they were like, this is a success story. These are the stories that we need to be telling more municipalities about. It's really impressive.
On that same topic, $3 million for the retiree health insurance, that's just a pay-as-you-go right now, that the amount that's needed? For
But
the-
yep, that's to pay for this year's retirees.
So there's nothing in there for the future OPEB kind of things?
Nope, just what we've appropriating for the OPEB trust.
Okay. And I noticed that there's nothing in there for the therapy dog?
No. The therapy dog's gonna be on Chief Gray's insurance, from what I understand, so we're
Thank
good.
you very much.
OPEB is actually a great name for a dog.
I think they should bring that therapy dog to the Board of Selectmen.
Mm-hmm.
How is free cash derived? I know it's somewhere in this 235-page document. Can you just tell me in layman's terms how you
How
derive free
you
cash?
derive at it? At the end of the year, once the budget's balanced, all the accounts are closed out, and the year is closed, it's a formula driven. It's it's a calculation that's done through the DOR. It basically takes all the numbers within the town, the budget, the cash numbers, the budget numbers, the turnbacks. It does a calculation. Whatever we have out there for accounts in reserve, it has to set that money aside. So it's not an easy formula that you can talk about in layman's terms,
I don't
because
feel so bad, I didn't
it,
understand.
yeah, in essence, it's like the retained earnings in the private sector. The money that's left over that isn't accounted for and need to be set aside for other purposes. So the DOR requires us to do that, and then whatever is left over. The term free cash really isn't free. I don't know how they ever come up with that term, but
When do you usually have that number by?
I typically have that somewhere around the middle of September.
One thing I will say that is notable here is that we've been turning over a lot of free cash every year. So we've been ending with free cash left, right? We're not spending it all.
Right.
And then that number is being recertified as part of our new free cash number. So it's not like we're generating $12 million in free cash every year. That's not at all what's happened. Looking back, last year, I believe we rolled over about $9 million. So we only generated $3 million in free cash last year, which actually was a lot more than usual looking at the spreadsheets because of Columbia Gas. So there was projects we didn't do last year, or money that we got from Columbia Gas that offset some of our expenses.
One-time revenue.
Exactly. When I talk about free cash, I always say to people that you're recertifying that old free cash, right? You're bringing that back again, unless for some reason you had a deficit somewhere and the state took it, which is not gonna happen here. But you're bringing that free cash back again, right? And then it's anything we're giving back, right? So let's say we didn't spend $20 in Lynn's budget, right? That's gonna roll over into free cash. And then anything we didn't expect during the year, right? So say we take a huge permit fee in, or somebody gives us a gift, but it's not for a gift account, or somebody who hasn't paid their taxes in 20 years suddenly pays, right? Those are all monies that we didn't think we were going to get. That all rolls into that free cash number.
All the surpluses, basically.
I have a question about cost inflation. We spend money basically on two things, people and stuff. And on the people side, you can see headcount and salaries. And putting aside OPEB, healthcare insurance, and wages for a second, and thinking about the other non-compensation costs of the town, what are a couple of areas that in the next 5 years you see cost inflation creeping in like those other expenses did, and the risk is they take a bigger and bigger piece of the pie? What are some potential inflationary areas, and what are we doing about it?
So this year, one thing that we saw an increase in was electricity, right? So we've got these fixed costs that really we can't do much about. And I always joke with people when we talk about the budget, and they'll say, the 2.5%, and I'm like, well, I wish we could tell, Columbia Gas, they can only go up 2.5%, because that would make my life easier, because a lot of the time, those are the ones that are increasing, right? The things that we can't really be ready for. And so one of the good things we can do when we have contracts, right, and we see future inflation coming forward, is that we can forecast for those, and that helps us, right? So we do that now with, like, if we know a software contract's going to increase, or we know that our copy machine contract's going to increase, we forecast for that, we build it into our future, and that's great, right? But we're trying to do more things with, like, buying power, so joining, like, buying collaborative, so we can have cheaper costs that way. The electrical aggregation, actually, in the long run, should help the town, because we're a part of that. Any solar that we can put on buildings. We're doing a lot of energy projects. So Steve Foster, our facilities person, has been leading the charge on that through Green Communities grants. And so those energy projects are ways that we can help decrease some of those costs that really are increasing due to inflation. And so I think that's kind of a lot of the initiatives that we're moving forward with.
Electricity is an interesting one. A lot of people in town have put solar on their roofs, and their bills are going down, and eventually they'll get paid to sell electricity back to the grid. What is the potential for that of our town? Like, how much penetrated are we?
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I mean, I've
Not
seen.
for the citizens, but for
For
the
us.
town.
Yeah, I mean, so we do have some credits now.
We do.
Currently. At Osgood, right? I think one of the things that we can think about, and that I've seen successfully happen, is if we have large tracts of land that are non-conservation land that we're not using, doing an RFP, putting it out and getting like a 10-year solar array on there. I'm not sure land-wise what we have that would qualify for that. A lot of our open space is open space because it's protected, but we can certainly look into that. And then, I mean, the roofs of our buildings, moving forward with some of our projects, making sure we're at least outfitting for solar if we can't do it immediately.
The only time I remember hearing about it was for Osgood.
Yes, the credit we
Right,
have for Osgood.
is
Yep.
for Osgood, yep. And we get a 15% savings on that, from that.
Anything else on the energy front?
So we have been getting Green Communities grants every year. A lot of the things that we've been doing most recently are like management systems for our buildings, making sure that we have like smart buildings so that we can shut the heat down and electricity when we're not in them. And so Steve can monitor the heat in my office, make sure it never goes above 61. Pretty sure that's what's happening. But, that's a lot of what we've been investing in right now, is trying to see savings that way. But we'll continue to do that. I mean, we've been very successful in our Green Communities grants. We should be very proud of it. We've bought electric cars through them. We've done a lot of new initiatives, and I think we will be continuing. So.
Special education stabilization fund.
Mhm.
I think this school was talking about using it in special town meeting this year, but I don't see any activity in the schedule here. Is that because you don't want to, or because of what reasons?
So we're having a lot of, the superintendent and I are having internal conversations about that right now. I would prefer to go away from the stabilization account because, again, it really is creating a structural deficit in the budget. If we're going to it every single year, right, it really is part of the operating budget at this point, and we're appropriating it through free cash. So I would rather have them go to the finance reserve account that we've created. Since that is from the general fund, it is an operating revenue. It would be a much more appropriate space, I believe. And so this year, we will have the surplus existing a little bit in health insurance, or a lot of it, we'll see, the health insurance. And I think that would be a better spot to go from than the stabilization account. I would like personally the stabilization account kind of go away as we continue to build into the budget.
So I would have two questions. So first, by updating the tax revenue and to go back to the level funding of healthcare, we took a lot of pressure out of the business planning discussions. Suddenly more money was available and less expenses. On the other side, first question, so how difficult is it? Well, I see year over year that our tax revenue is always higher at the end than what's forecasted. So what's driving that? I mean, the base is fairly stable. The assessment, it's really in our control. So why can't we get closer to that number?
So that 650, 750 number is based just really on construction in single-family homes. Not new single-family homes, just regular permits that are pulled regularly. When we have higher than estimated new growth, or what I would call extraordinary new growth, it's because we've had something new come to town. So this year, we've got a bank that's coming on. That's a new construction next to the 99. We've got a convenience store that is coming on, which is unusual. And we also had quite a few new houses, which is not something that we typically would see. But it's difficult for us to forecast those because we never know what's going to be coming. And so we have to wait until those permits are pulled. And that's why it's been more difficult. That 750 number historically is an accurate number for new growth, and that's typically where we would stay. This year, I think, is extraordinary. Last year was extraordinary, but typically we really land around that 750 number. And last year, if I'm correct, a lot of the new growth from last year was actually due to one project. Princeton, okay.
And Thomas, the issue with budgeting new growth too high and building a budget around that and have it not come to fruition, it has to come from somewhere. So if you don't have the other revenue sources within the budget to make up that variance at the end of the year, then you have to make budget cuts.
Right.
And that means it's a tough decision come October, November, and you have to make budget cuts because new growth didn't come into what we budgeted. So that's why that number is always a conservative number. But as Melissa said, where we have these larger projects and we sat down, the building permits have been pulled, we could better determine based on the value of the building permits with the help of the assessor's office, building inspector, and planning to come closer to a number that we feel comfortable upping that for this year, and probably we'll look at it the same way for next year. But it's not gonna be consistent because we're gonna eventually be built out, and then it's gonna go back to the 650, 700,000. So.
So also with, for me, it's a little bit of a change of a business planning approach to previous town manager. Now we show, I think it was always known that revenue will come in higher, and that healthcare is actually will come in lower in previous years. Now we put it in a reserve. So let's assume we're not spending all of that, or we don't have to. So what we do with that reserve after that? Is it goes into a big pot, or we just leave it in a reserve? We just
No, at the
add
end of the
and
fiscal year, we'll
accumulate?
roll over to free cash. So it's like a regular account in our budget. So if we don't spend it at the end of the year, it would roll into free cash. I know it's a change. For me, it's really important. The budget transparency is really important. And so it's okay to keep it in the health insurance line item. But then when people talk about health insurance, they don't understand what our health insurance costs really are, right? And so the average person opening the budget last year is going to say, wow, the town's health insurance was $12 million, when it wasn't, right? It was $10 million. And so for me, having a more transparent document and having people be able to understand how we operate is really important. And that's why the finance reserve account is, I think, the better way to do it.
And how's the approval process to get money out of the reserve?
We have to come to you.
Okay.
Yep, we have to come to you. So we'll create
So
an
that's
application.
also a change. Previously,
We used to
it should,
have a finance committee reserve many years ago.
yeah.
It only had a couple 100,000 and it didn't have a million. or
You
a
still
million
have to
and a
make
half
transfers though. When
Right.
if we want to use the health insurance line item, we still come to
We
you to
come
ask
to
for
you
that transfer.
At the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now we'll be able to come to you year round though. So if we had an issue, let's say we had a building that needed to be demolished, right? Or we had a roof go on a building, right? Things that we can't plan for. We don't know. This is, oh, we have an emergency. We had a bad storm. We'd be able to come to you in October and say, we had this roof go. We need a transfer from the finance reserve account. And then you vote on it.
I think it's awesome.
Thank you.
quite frankly, in terms of transparency.
Yep.
And if it operates the same as kind of we were previously, it allows taxpayers to have a better understanding of how our budget's operating. And I think that's a really good thing.
Thank you.
So,
A little bit
thank you.
more confidence that the finance committee is also involved in the decision of how we spend that.
Which is good.
Would
Wanna-
you defer to that over the other stabilization reserve funds that you have set aside for capital, for revenue shortfalls and things like that?
So the reason that the stabilization accounts are important is two things. Bond counsel and our bond rating really is hinged on those stabilization accounts. They want to know that we have those rainy day funds in place. And those accounts are really for legitimate emergencies. They require us to go to town meeting. They require a 2/3 vote. We can only access them one time a year unless we go to a special town meeting. They're really there beyond kind of a rainy day fund. They're there for actual emergencies, the regular stabilization account. And so I see these actually quite differently.
Okay, I get that. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions specifically for Melissa or Lynn before we? Does anyone, I also want to open it up. Tim, you have a question before I?
No, I'd just like to, this is a good presentation, good
Thank
budget.
you.
I'd like to be able to study it though, a little bit more, and develop all my questions kind of thing.
Fair.
And the reason, one of the things that I get out of the budget process, by the way, is each of the department heads talks about their prior year accomplishments and their future goals. And there's so much information on those words alone, let alone the numbers. Numbers are numbers. But I'd like to see what all that material is first.
I did want to invite anyone, you guys are all here, and I greatly appreciate you attending. If anyone wants to come up and kind of talk about their budget specifically at this point, or, if that's okay with you, Melissa.
Oh, fine.
Specifically any of kind of the new things that were highlighted, feel free. If you think Melissa covered it, that's fine too, no pressure. But we always like to hear from department heads as well. So.
We are missing a few people because of school vacation week, so a couple people are away.
Yeah.
But they're all running.
I know.
They're all ready to answer any questions you have.
You gotta ask a question. though.
Yeah.
So, I would just ask, and maybe you can help me with this. So, what are some of the kind of steps you and the superintendent are going to take over, the next coming months to work on, how we're going to creatively fund or think about funding, the school's 5-year kind of plan, strategic plan, and get to that. And I'm sure part of it's part of facilities master plan too, but, could you kind of talk about that a little bit?
So a lot of the superintendent's 5-year vision really does hinge on space. So we've been kind of talking about that a lot, how his initiatives are really space oriented. And one of the things that is going to really be key in this analysis is going to be the Facilities Master Plan 2. So the Facilities Master Plan 2 contract has been signed. They've already been in town. They're touring the schools now to work on the space assessment. And so seeing that and knowing how they're going to lay that out is, I think, certainly going to change and tweak what the 5-year plan looks like for the school department. But in the meantime, we've been having a lot of conversations internally, and it looks like what we're going to do is kind of create an internal working group to really talk about what those needs look like. Is it 4 years? Is it 10 years? Is it 12 years? How long really realistically would it take us to get where they want to be, based on the forecast, based on what we know today? And then I think what we'll be doing is really talking about, do we take extraordinary new growth and pivot it in one direction? Do we take just a certain type of extraordinary new growth and have it be sent that way? We're kind of having those preliminary conversations now, but the plan is to do it within a working group with staff. So,
That's helpful. Thank you.
no problem.
Anyone have any questions about that? So I would like to open it up to public comment while you guys are still available, if that's okay.
Sure, of course.
And thank you so much for coming, and the presentation was incredibly helpful. I'm sure there'll be some additional questions. I know we've kind of gone through it, but to give us a little more time to dig in, and we may come back to you with some of those. So if anyone has any public comment, you are welcome to come forward. Open it up.
We're all looking at Stan.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know, sure. It's going to be disappointed. Stanley for 43 Stonecleve Road. I only have compliments for everybody involved. Certainly the town manager, our director of finance, deputy town manager. Everybody has just done a great job in putting this budget together. And I think, as we saw previously, where we had sort of a quantum change in the way we budgeted with our last town manager, now I think we're seeing yet another change in budgeting that's going to be even more advantageous for us to have better transparency and, really better utilization of the money. So, you've raised the big elephant in the room is, where do we get more money? How are we going to do that? The thing that has come across to me, and actually Chief McCarthy sort of brought this up when the town manager made this presentation at the Board of Selectmen meeting. We've heard so much about schools and per pupil spending and the tale of woe about all of that. In many ways, our municipal side is in the same boat. They haven't been overfunded for the last 10 or 20 years either. So I don't think they should be left out of this discussion, and it shouldn't just be purely school focused. It should be the town and what we need to do to bring all of our services up to where we'd like them to be. So I think it's important for you all to be thinking about that as you start talking about this down the road discussion about where do we go and how do we get the funds. Everybody needs to be included in that discussion, municipal as well as the school side. I think that's a very important thing. And I had sort of, I've been, as you know, I've been dealing a lot with schools over the past few years. And so I've been focused on that. But Chief McCarthy really reminded me that, there's a lot of other things we need to be thinking about too, where we may need to provide some more funding for other municipal uses where we haven't been doing that either. They haven't been getting any more robust funding than the schools have been getting. So I think it's for all of us to think about. And, it's going to be very challenging. It really is going to be challenging. And, I think we've all been thinking that there's going to be windfalls in our future here. There's going to be big bags of money showing up. Maybe someday, but I don't think that's going to happen very soon. So I think we're going to have to solve these problems long before big bags of money show up, and we're going to have to figure out some way to do that. So, the challenge is ahead of us, and, you all can be really big players in that. You can be a big help to help our town sort of figure all that out and try to help us sort of plot a course through some tough waters here, but we'll figure it out. We've always done that. So anyway, and it's always wonderful to see, just like we saw with the school committee budget presentation, the great leadership team for our schools, the great leadership team here for our town. It's nice to see everybody here, so thanks.
Thank you, Stan. I think, I would agree, and I think from my perspective, and I won't speak on behalf of the whole committee, but we have been focused on the schools because we've been asking so long for a strategic plan or some kind of strategic outlook, and we always felt, at least in my perspective, that if a strategic plan was needed, it was already established, or we would receive that pretty promptly from the municipal side. So I think that's a really good point, and now that we have a forward-looking plan from the school side to match that with, you know, we have a new town manager to bring new perspective to match those together and have one, you know, plan looking forward as opposed to thinking about it separately. So thank you, Stan.
Do I have one more question for Melissa, town manager? On the finance reserve, what's the legal vehicle to make all that happen? I mean, I'm hearing you say it, but is that a town meeting vote that says, gives the authority to the finance committee to yay or nay any request for, you know, moving those dollars? I mean, what kind of vehicle is that gonna be?
Yeah, it's actually, finance reserves are through DOR. Yeah, so it's a DOR mechanism, actually, Department of Revenue.
Okay.
So town meeting will obviously appropriate the fund.
Yep.
But yes, it's through the Department of Revenue, so it's will be a special account that will be opened.
Okay. That's all.
Any other questions, comments? All right, thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you
very
all.
much. We appreciate it. All right. All right. Okay, so
She said she's got the reference.
we'll see. All right. Everyone's kind of heading out now, but we are going to approve our minutes from last meeting.
Those are hard, these are soft. Okay.
Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Oh, you weren't here.
It should be somebody that was here.
I think you weren't here.
Oh,
I'm sorry?
I said so moved.
oh, I couldn't hear you.
Okay.
Do I have a second? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, minutes approved. Divya. All right, we can move on to old business. So I was actually going to have Jen give us kind of an update on the Stevens estate, but she is with family this week because of February vacation. So I overlooked that when I put that in the agenda. Does anyone have anything that they wanted to discuss as part of old business, or do we want to move right through it? Okay. Anything else that you want to discuss before we adjourn? All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Do I have a second? All those in favor? Great. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.